Mm-hmm.
And we always want to make it very clear, like, okay, let's break it down, because you're probably not. You're probably doing better than you're giving yourself credit for. You're just not thinking about it the way that will make sense to your child and the way that the skill actually functions.
Hey, sweet mama. Welcome back to another episode of Mom in Process. It is Thursday, which means I have the incredible honor of introducing you to expert guests on Thursdays. And today's is a little bit unique in that I actually have the honor of introducing you to two incredible expert guests. I have a beautiful conversation with Justine and Cynthia. They are the owners and founders of Live and Learn Letter, which is a newer hands-on play-based learning unit for ages 3 through 12. This company they started because of the pandemic is growing incredibly quickly because of their beautiful unit studies and their capacity to encourage and include all of the students and all of the children in a household, where they're also supporting not only the children and engaging in play, but they're also encouraging and supporting the parents as well. So Justine and Cynthia and I sit down and we dive into homeschool, the reasons why we chose to homeschool, the beautiful aspects that it can bring to the table, the moments that we need for self-reflection, but also how their unique unit studies really encompass the entire learning dynamic of each individual child and really embraces the fun in home education and home learning. It really allows us to squash this idea of what the traditional school mindset is and really embrace our children where they're at and encourage them where they're at. So we dive into all things homeschool, a little bit of mom talk. We got interrupted a couple of times because, of course, all three of us are mothers, which you will learn about in their intros. And that's life. That is true mom life. And I loved every single aspect of it. So grab a cozy beverage. You might want to grab a little piece of paper and some notes or a pen to take some notes, because we really talk about a lot of things and a lot of opportunities for you to just stop, pause, do some self-reflective work on, and really think about the opportunities that a unit study like this could really bring to the dynamics of your family. One of the things that I do want to add is that this also pertains to families that have young children that are just starting to get their feet wet and wanting to embrace learning, and they're getting engaged and they're really curious. You may not be fully set on homeschooling. You may not be interested in homeschooling at all, but their play-based unit studies are perfect for those that you have at home still, or still before you have your older children heading off to public school or whatever other school options that you so choose. So this might be a really great episode for you to listen to if you have a 2-year-old that's starting to get really curious, or a 3-year-old that's starting to get really curious, but they're not quite ready for preschool, or they're not quite ready to leave the house and go to a school outside of the home. So grab a cozy beverage, like I already suggested, and join Justine and Cynthia and myself in this incredible conversational journey. Justine, Cynthia, hi. Thank you so much for coming on today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
Yes, I am really excited to dive into this conversation with both of you. And we are going to talk about homeschooling. So for any of the non-homeschool home educating mamas, I still think that this could be a really great conversation, especially if you have young children still at home that aren't really ready to transition out of the household, but you're maybe looking for some additional activities for them to do and kind of get going on this sort of intro to school, and maybe just dive into a little bit of preschool at home. So don't push pause, don't turn it off, because I still think that Cynthia and Justine have a lot to share and a lot of knowledge on just engaging and play and the benefits of doing those things at home with our kids, especially as stay-at-home moms. So why don't you guys just take a second and introduce yourselves? And I just am so curious in how you decided to create this curriculum and how you guys decided to do this together.
So I'll start. My name is Cynthia, and I have 3 boys. I have a 5-year-old, and a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old. I started homeschooling my oldest in 2007. It would have been his kindergarten year, and he homeschooled all the way through 12th grade. And then he went to community college and graduated with his associate's degree. My 17-year-old is currently in 11th grade and is still homeschooling. He'll be finishing out 11th grade in just a few weeks. And then Noah is 5, and he's going to start kindergarten next year.
Mm-hmm. I love the age gap. I know we were talking about that earlier, but I just think that probably just rocked your world when you had to start over.
There was not a planned baby. And so there was definitely some challenges for me to get my head around having to start all over again. But obviously there's a lot of advantages to being an older mom and being able to, in a way, get a do-over, be able to start from scratch, but also have all the experience of the first time around.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I'm over here like, oh my goodness, that sounds so much fun, which is such a total naive thought. I'm like, you have all the help, you're an experienced mom, and you're like, but I've transitioned out of this phase of my life. Now I have to get back into it. Justine, so I want to hear your story.
So I'm Justine LaMonaco. I have 2 little girls that are 6.5 and 3.5. And I had never really seen myself as being a homeschooler. I wasn't really exposed to it that much growing up. I went to public school and honestly had a pretty good experience. But then when I met Cynthia, she was homeschooling her boys, and it kind of blew my mind how she did it, because it was just this very tailored approach to education. And it seemed they did so many fun things. They were rarely at home. They were always at museums and doing field trips and meeting with other families. And it just made me think about education in a new way. And I started to think, oh, I think this is what I'm going to do. I feel like this feels right to me. And of course, I was actually sad that she had older children, because I was like, well, that means when I get started, I'm going to have to be all by myself. And I was with Cynthia when she found out she was going to be having Noah. And literally one of my first thoughts was, we can homeschool together. I was so excited to have her as this resource, because she'd been such a source of encouragement and information even before I officially started homeschooling. So I've homeschooled my oldest through preschool, kindergarten, and we're almost done with our 1st grade year now. And all plans to continue moving forward. And my youngest thinks that she is also in 1st grade, because she does basically everything with us.
I love that. So did you guys grow up being homeschooled?
No.
No, neither of you did. Yeah. Okay. So same, we all have that in common. When I had brought it up to my husband, it was, like, well, no, like they'll go to public school. We had such a great experience. Look at all these friends we made. And what about what about sports in high school and things like that? And I don't know how it is in Virginia where you guys are, but they can actually still play high school sports. And so when we kind of started to dive into this and find out some more information, it was like, oh, this might actually be a good opportunity for us. But then I wasn't brave enough to do it. So my hat goes off to you guys to take the plunge and step in, because we ended up taking the plunge to do this pretty much because of COVID. I mean, and just because we got our feet wet, we tried it and we ended up really liking it. And it was not anything to do with the public school system or anything like that. We still have good relationships with some of the teachers that are down there. It was literally just, this fits my lifestyle better. This fits the dynamic that we want in our household and our family. And I felt like the kids were thriving so much more when they were home and we were doing this type of education versus when they were gone for 8 hours a day. So here we are.
When we started, we actually sent Caleb to preschool, and our intent was to use the public school system. But I found that 1st year of preschool, we had a lot of frustrations for different reasons. But one of the main reasons is that I felt like the school alienated parents. We were in New York City, and they just had a lot of rules about, this is as far as a parent can go, and you need permission to come back into the school. Like, we were never allowed in the classroom. There wasn't observation opportunities or opportunities to be a helper in the classroom. So it just felt like I was turning him over and now I wasn't involved anymore. There was also just a few issues with dietary issues. Like there were things that Caleb couldn't eat. And even though preschool was only 4 hours long, they were serving him 2 meals. And they weren't always respectful of our dietary restrictions. I also felt like there was just a few issues with religious issues where they weren't really being respectful of our beliefs. So at that point, we finished preschool, and I knew I didn't want to send him back to that school for kindergarten. And in New York State, kindergarten isn't mandated. So we were like, well, let's just take a year off, figure out what we're going to do. We had applied to some charter schools, some private schools, and he didn't get into any of them. So then that's when I started looking into homeschooling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you started, and both of you guys can answer this if you want. We had talked about this a little bit earlier, but I had to take the public school out of me. And, and I knew that I needed to do that before I even knew there was a term for it. And it's, the term is deschooling, and getting that out of my system, because that's all I ever knew. So, we have to have a specific classroom, and we have to, do this set schedule, and we're going to do math at this time and science at this time and language arts at this time. So what do you consider deschooling? Can you dive into that and maybe what that looked like for you guys if you had to do it?
Yeah, I think your story, Amy, is actually really common. So many people that we talk to, and so much of the community that we've built on Instagram, we hear a lot of stories from people that were thrown into homeschooling because of the pandemic and never really saw themselves doing it. And a lot of them, when they initially started, really wanted to do school at home. They were just trying to recreate what they remembered doing as a kid. And this happens to a lot of new homeschoolers. And we talk about deschooling a lot within our company when we talk to our subscribers, because really it's one of the first things a family should do when they first start down the homeschooling path. And essentially what that is really taking the time to assess, what are my biases and preconceived notions about what education, what learning is? In my head, am I picturing a kid sitting at a table, holding a pencil, copying what the teacher is writing on the board? Because at the end of the day, research, science has shown that that's not actually how little kids really learn best, that they learn best through play. That is their work that their brain is wired to do, and how they discover the world around them and really make sense of it. So when we are talking to parents and they are having a really hard time homeschooling, they feel like they're failing at it. Most of the time, it's that they haven't taken the time to go through that deschooling process and think like, okay, I'm trying to fit this mold that I think I have to do. But really, there's so much freedom in homeschool. There's so many different ways to do it that there's going to be something that appeals to your child. So that's always our big advice. And then we talk about a lot at the beginning of the year as we have new families joining, especially in the beginning levels of our program. So they're brand new to homeschooling, is really helping them do that mental work and recognize that it is sort of an ongoing thing. Every time you're educating your child at a new age, it's your first time doing that. So you might have to reassess multiple times. Okay, I'm trying to force this. It's not working. Why? Why is it so important to me? Why do I think it needs to look like this or go like this? And is that something I can let go of to find more joy and help my child have more of a love of learning?
I love that. It was something that I knew that I had to do right off the bat, because I didn't want to, I could feel myself being pulled to do what I knew, right? Which I was just doing the reflective work and figuring out like, this isn't going to work. This is just not going to work. Plus Lily was 1 at the time. And I just knew, okay, I have a 1-year-old. We cannot do 8 to 3 with a 1-year-old. Like it's just not going to happen. So I love that you broke that down for us a little bit. So what made you guys start the curriculum? I mean, what made you start all of this journey?
So this is one of my favorite stories about our company. Cynthia has said for years, oh, one day, like when we're going to write our own curriculum. And I was very much a newbie homeschooler. I did not feel confident telling anyone what to do when it came to homeschooling. And so I'd always say, okay, yeah, sure. Like someday, like maybe when Vivi goes to college, then we'll do this. And then the pandemic hit. And I was working remotely at the time, and all of my coworkers were parents, and everyone was getting thrown into homeschooling. And at this point, I was in my second year, and it had been my plan all along. So nothing really changed in my life when the pandemic started as far as needing to take my kids out of school, anything like that. But all of these families were getting thrown into it, and they were freaking out. We would have these coworker Slack chats where everyone was losing their minds essentially and literally crying in the middle of the day because they had no idea what to do. They felt like it was so beyond their ability to educate their own child. And I kept trying to say to them something that Cynthia had been telling me all this time, was just that's not what education is. Like you don't have to have a million worksheets you fill out. You don't have to sit for 8 hours doing school. Like there's so many constructs of education that don't exist for the purpose of learning. They exist for a myriad of other reasons. And so I was actually putting together what I know now were essentially tiny unit studies, like 5 activities around a theme that they could do throughout the week. And one was sort of math related, one was a book, one was a video or a song or something that they would get them up and moving. And I said, just do this. Just do these 5 things this week. And if that is all you do, that's fine. Mm-hmm. And then in the back of my mind, I kept flashing back to these conversations that I'd had with Cynthia about like, well, maybe we could do this. Maybe if it is just as simple as showing people what education for a little kid can be and how fun it can be, I feel confident doing that. And then I started thinking, okay, I worked in email marketing at the time. And I said, wouldn't it be so great if you just got an email that had, here's what to do and here's what to buy. Now just go, have fun, just do it. You don't have to do any of the mental like decision heavy lifting, finding all of these things. Like we found them, click this link, go do it. Mm-hmm. And so I came to her the next morning, like could not fall asleep thinking about it. I was like, so remember when you said you wanted to start a curriculum? I had this idea. And as I'm like kind of walking everything, I said, she's like, yes, that is. And I was like, and I think we should call it the Learn and Live letter. So that is what we should call it. And so it was like right away, this meeting of the minds for us. And I feel like what we both bring to the company are very opposite skill sets in a lot of ways, but it's everything we need to get it done. And so 2 months after that conversation on my back patio, we launched the company with subscribers and people actually getting our lesson plans and doing them and posting about their experiences and getting to see that instant people bringing it to life. And really, we encourage a lot of flexibility, a lot of modifying for what your kid likes to do, seeing them take what we created and use it as a springboard to figure out what worked best for their family was so rewarding. And then hearing people talk about, we've been doing X, Y, and Z before and hating it. And now we're doing this and my child asks to do school. That was so rewarding. And then hearing the parents say, I'm enjoying it now. Like I look forward to doing school and it's this little chunk of our day. And then we go about our day and we know I've checked all of these things off. I feel really good about it. My child is loving learning. Everyone was winning. And so that was just a really exciting thing. We started with just a kindergarten-based level. And then in our second year, we expanded to 3 levels. So now our units are for kids ages 3 to 12. Mm-hmm. And so this has been our first year of having older learners and really seeing how families are modifying that. How we're seeing whole families learning together, which also takes a big load off of the parent. So it's just been growing since there. We're introducing a new level next year and a new membership structure, and just excited to see all of that come to life. Mm-hmm.
I love that so much. So I want to clarify what your curriculum looks like for the audience if they've never heard of it before, but it's not a book, open and go book. So can you clarify exactly what the curriculum and what this sort of play-based hands-on learning looks like? And you can start by explaining it's a membership. You guys just transition in the membership if you want, but I'll just let you go. Just go.
So what you actually are a member of our curriculum. So sort of like a gym membership. So that membership gives you access to all of the levels that are available. Within those levels, which are broken down by age range, you will receive what's called a unit study. And a unit study is very similar to what a teacher will do in school. If you think back to when your teacher might have had a theme that was carried on throughout the week, and they perhaps like talked about apples. So the first day you would, learn about seeds, and the next day you would see a plant grow. And so that's what a unit study is at its base level. But what our unit studies try to do is allow for that natural progression. So each unit will have one theme, and we'll have several books, children's books that will help that theme come to life. And sometimes that book is a picture book that tells a story. Sometimes it's a biography or an autobiography that helps add color to that theme. And there's also some, they're not called encyclopedias for little kids. What are they called?
Like a reference book.
Like a reference book. So those will be written by someone with a lot of experience on that topic, but that has broken that information down so that it's kid friendly. And usually they're beautifully illustrated and really cover that topic in depth. And so we have a theme, we have books, and then we look for hands-on activities that will bring all of that to life. For our very young kids, those activities will really focus on fine motor skills, gross motor skills, sensory activities, so that they get to really experience what that would be. They also will have some literacy and some, we'll call it math, for introducing that topic, but it won't be in a worksheet. Usually it'll involve a lot of kinesthetic learning, so it'll have manipulatives, it'll have ways for those things to become concrete and not abstract topic facts that just feel unrelatable. And then as they get older, there's going to be a lot of history and science. And when we say older, we mean like 4. Because now they're ready to experiment and they're curious about things. And that's all science really is. It's just someone was curious about something, they wanted to know the answer, and they did experiments till they found it. And also history, because really all history is a story. And kids love stories, so they love history. So our unit studies will touch on things that you might not think a little kid is ready to learn, but they are, and they get so excited about those topics. And there are so many books that are prepared already, so that all you have to do is know they're there, and then you can present it to your kid like a banquet.
And they're all books that your child would want to read before bedtime. Like they are very story-based. Like Cynthia said, they have these beautiful illustrations. They're very engaging. Even the reference books, like some of our favorite authors for those, we love Yuval Zamir. He does like the Big Book of the Blue, which is all ocean animals. And you're reading through it and it's so many facts, but for a kid, it's just this big, beautiful page that they get to explore. Oh, what's this? What does this say? And they just want to dive right into it. So they're not, even though they are books that you walk away learning so much, there's always this central story that leads you through that your child just thinks we're reading books together. They don't think like I'm sitting here reading a textbook, even though they're getting probably just as much information as they would if you were reading a textbook to them, except this way they can actually absorb it in a way that's meaningful for them.
And do we have to buy these from you guys, or are these books that we can just check out at the library?
So we put together supply lists for each of our units that have the books. We do always link to Amazon. So if somebody does have to buy something, they can get it very quickly. But if it's available online, openlibrary.org is one of our favorite online resources for ebooks that are free. We'll link to that. If we can't find it there, we'll try to find YouTube Read Aloud. And then most of them are available in libraries. Sometimes you have a book that's just very new that might not be in a library yet, but we've worked with a lot of libraries that are more than willing to call books in, especially if it's in their network, or to make a purchase for the library if they think it's a really good book that they should have. So we do our best to keep that as cost effective as possible. I love books, and so does Cynthia. And I know we do end up buying a lot of them, particularly if you have younger children. It's just nice to have that homeschool library that can really grow with your family. And the books that we're choosing ones that will grow with your child. So they're not only going to be interested in reading that story when they're 4, then when they're 6, they might be more interested in the real person that the book is about and want to dive more into who that person was and the things they accomplished. So our purpose is to only recommend things that we think are truly valuable.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I'm a huge proponent of the library and we go every single week. And we've built actually an entire community around going to the library every single week, which is super fun. But I want to just encourage people too. We use the online resource of the library because they have a network. And so we are so good. And our librarian is so good about like calling in ahead of time. Can you put these on hold for us? Or you can go to the website and pick out which books you need so that way they're there when you go to pick them up. You know, we go every Thursday. So that way they're there when we go to pick them up on Thursdays, or I'll talk to the librarian on Thursday about what we need to pick up the following week. So the shipment comes in. So I just want to make sure that people understand that most of the libraries really do have that as a resource if you just plan a little bit ahead.
Right. Librarians are great. They just want you to read. They'll do whatever they can to help you.
Yes. We are very spoiled in our small town. Our librarian knows us very well. And she really goes above and beyond for us. I absolutely love it. So shout out to her. So what style of learning do your lessons sort of encompass? You know, homeschoolers will hear of Montessori or unschooling, or, you know, all of the different Charlotte Mason, like all of these different types of schooling. So what does yours encompass?
So our lessons are written in an eclectic style. Like you said, there are so many philosophies and approaches out there, and we honestly think that they all have something really great to offer. But in our personal experience, we never found one that met all of our needs, or there was always something about it that we're like, that doesn't really fit my kid. That doesn't really fit the way I like to teach even. So when we wanted to create our curriculum, we wanted to take what we think are the best parts of all of those philosophies and bring them together in a way that is hands-on and play-based and supports families for what really works best for them.
I love that. When we signed up for our home education program, we actually still do ours through this date. I don't need to go into all the details of it, but they ask you what your style of
that's
home
interesting.
education is. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. This is
so like, ask me the day of, I'll tell you that.
Seriously. Yes. And it changes every day for us, you know, like literally some days it's unschooling and I'm like, well, that was school today, even though we didn't do anything that we traditionally do. You know, we made dandelion jelly the other day. So we went out and we gathered dandelions and we ended up making dandelion jelly. I'm like, that was school today. And it was so good for them. And I'm able to say that without the guilt. Right. But when you have to like put a name on it, you know, put a title on it, and my hat goes off to those people. I have nothing against people that are able to do that. You know, like we follow Montessori to a T and we love everything about it. That's amazing. And I think that's so great. But that just with the same with you guys, that wasn't really fitting me and what we were wanting to do in our house when I was diving into all of the education behind this and all the different philosophies. I'm like, I mean, I like this, but I'm not sure about this, but I like this. So can I just pull pieces? So I love that it's more eclectic and it builds on all of that. So one of the questions, this kind of goes into what we were kind of talking about earlier, but one of the questions that Cassie, my assistant, had for you, because I think she's transitioning into your guys' curriculum this next year, which is so exciting.
That is exciting.
Yes. So I told her, I said, well, what questions do you have for these gals? And I'm sure she would have loved to hop on this call too. I should have invited her. But so her son is going to he'll be in first grade. Yeah. He's the same age as Olivia. And he loves science and math, but she's having a hard time getting him engaged in reading and language arts. So how does your curriculum allow for those subjects that the kids are not interested in? because they still have to learn those, they still need to learn to read in order to learn science and really kind of dive into that as they get older. So how does your curriculum support that type of learning?
So first, I think anyone who is homeschooling first needs to think about if the resistance has any reason, or if there's any underlying reason for their resistance. So is there neurodiversity? Is there a learning disability? Is there a vision or a hearing issue at play? Is there any medical reason to believe that that's why your child is resisting? If you're pulling a kid out of the public school system, maybe they're a little bit older and they're transitioning to homeschool and there's something that they're resisting, take time to delve into, could there be another reason? Is there more than just what you as a parent might interpret as rebelliousness or apathy? And take time to figure that out. Now, if all that's out of the way, and now you just say, hey, you know what, my kid's just not into something, be okay with that. I know it's like the worst thing for parents to hear, but how many adults do you know that just are not into something that you are? Like, you might be someone who loves reading but hates documentaries. Mm-hmm. I like to read, but not as much as Justine. Justine will go through books and books and books, but I find I learn better through documentaries. I will watch hours of documentaries and interviews, and I'll read interviews and just read the most abstract things, but I rarely read fiction. Mm-hmm. I don't enjoy it. Mm-hmm. So if we're okay being different, then make it okay for our kids to be different. Mm-hmm. And now, yes, everyone agrees that kids do need to learn how to read, and they do need some basic skills. But sometimes it takes a little bit of creativity on our part to figure that out. When I was homeschooling my two older kids, when I lived in New York City, I ran a club that actually became the basis for all things level 3 that is in our program. That club in New York was called Passport to the World, and it was open to anyone in our community who wanted to be a part of it. And it was based on countries and cultures. So once a month, I would pick a country. Everybody would, at home on their own, research some aspect of it. We would come together once a month and the kids would present their findings. And we had some kids that were really into one thing. And there was one little girl I remember who was really into fashion. And her mom absolutely let her really be into fashion. But imagine all the things that she was able to learn. She learned about the silk process, how it's made from the silkworm all the way through the textile process, cotton. She learned about looming. She learned about dyeing fabric. She learned how people's cultures and customs related to what they wore, how the climate related. She learned about how pelts are made from animals. She learned about the science and the history, but it was all through this eye of fashion. And so sometimes if we get out of that school mentality that this is what math looks like, this is what reading looks like, this is what history looks like, this is what science looks like, if we just remove those boundaries and let our kids learn what they're interested in and facilitate that learning, think outside the box, be creative, we're going to be so surprised with what they learn, what they know, and how much they love it, and how much better it is for us, the facilitators, the educators, to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. And something that I would add to that is that we've also found that kids are the best at sniffing out busy work. And I think back to my own school experience and how many times that we've all thought, well, when am I ever going to use this? And when things feel useless, they're not fun to learn. So if your child is irritated every time you bring up a certain subject, I found it to be very helpful to make it relevant to their life and the real world. So we talk a lot about going on field trips when you talk about history to see historical sites. So now this place that they're learning about takes on real meaning when they're reading about it. Or showing them how we actually do use math in the real world when we're making calendars or budgeting or we're cooking. and giving them meaningful writing assignments. So my daughter, I never have to give her school writing assignments because she loves to make signs that she hangs around our house, usually telling my husband things he's not allowed to do, which always cracks me up. Or she loves to write notes to people that she's going to see or that she misses. And giving them meaningful writing assignments, like writing cards or helping you with a grocery list, adds in value that helps them to see the value of that skill. So even if it's not their favorite, they at least understand what you were saying before, that they do need to know how to do these things so they can do the things that they want to do.
Right. Yes.
And I want to add one more thing. Now that we're talking,
We talk about this a lot.
I talk about writing a lot because my older kids, it was always a struggle in our homeschool. And when I tell you how many writing curriculums I went through, I just gave them all my money. Anytime I saw something new, I was like, wow, let's try this. Because they just did not like writing. They just didn't. And I was like, well, maybe it's their hand hurts, so let's type. They just did not get it. And it was so frustrating because I felt like I'm failing. Like I'm the worst homeschooler. Like I don't know why my kids just won't write. They didn't. Okay, so now I have my oldest, Caleb, who goes through high school, doesn't really write. At that point, we were unschooling. So he was going to things, never wrote anything. And I was like, oh, all right, I guess that's it. Goes to college, takes his first college class, writing English 101, and he gets his professor who he loves. And now he's got to write 5, 10-page essays for her. And like the first few, she was like, well, work on this, work on that. And then all of a sudden, he just flourished. And it was like he had been writing his whole life. He was like A+ student in this college class, finished that class with an A, went on to the next one, got another A. Then he was finished with his English requirements, and he started taking English classes as electives and started taking British Lit and writing all these papers for her. And I was like, what in the actual hell? Like, how is it that you could not write one paragraph for me all while we were homeschooling? And now your college professor thinks you're a genius writer.
And it's so interesting because I knew these boys when they were just like, it's not those little kids complaining about their writing assignments. And I was a professional writer by trade. So I was always like, you love to tell stories. I know you love to write. You just aren't thinking about it as stories. Because they will talk your ear off. Like most homeschool children, they never stop talking. And
Isn't that the truth? Oh my gosh.
To anyone who will pause long enough to make eye contact. Yes. They're like, you want to hear about my dog? Yes. And so I'm growing up with these little boys who are, now becoming teenagers and complain. And like, you love to tell me things. So this is just asking you to put what you're telling into written word. And I think that's something we talk about a lot with our writing assignments, even in our curriculum, is that it's when you're talking about something like writing, it's so important to be very specific about what skill you are actually working on. Because if you're actually working on handwriting, we will tell you to take a very different approach to it. But if you are talking about storytelling, which is an equally important skill if you want to be any kind of writer or human being, honestly, then we will give you a very different assignment. And sometimes we give writing assignments where really we include a line in our curriculum. This is not about your child sitting down with a pencil and writing out a beginning, middle, and end to a story. This is about them creating a story. And if they don't want to write it down, you could write it for them, or they can type it, or they can do something else. They could just do a comic that has no text and they just read it through and tell you what's happening. And that is a successful writing assignment, even if they didn't touch a pencil the whole time. So that's something we always really want to emphasize with that specific skill, because it gives parents a lot of angst. So many, like math and writing, people lose their minds and are always convinced that they're failing. And we always want to make it very clear, like, okay, let's break it down, because you're probably not. You're probably doing better than you're giving yourself credit for. You're just not thinking about it the way that will make sense to your child and the way that the skill actually functions.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And as you're telling that story, Cynthia, too, I was thinking about my friend Cassie's little boy and the storytelling aspect, Justine, how you kind of, dove a little bit deeper in your knowledge of her boys and how they tell these stories. And that's exactly how Cassie's son is. He's such a storyteller. Hey, sweet mama, did you hear the news? I'm so excited to tell you that we finally launched the Mom in Process blog. What? I'm so excited about this. So if you love the podcast, if you love the conversations, the mindset, the tough love, the humor, because oh my goodness, it seems like there's so much humor in motherhood and just being a woman, then I know you are going to love the Mom in Process blog. It is different than how a lot of other podcasters run their blogs. And the reason why is because I didn't want to just regurgitate the already existing content. I wanted to expand on the content. I wanted to use what we're talking about and take it a step further. So the blog is absolutely worth your time. There's going to be takeaways from it. There's going to be topics that we talk about in the podcast, and there's going to be new topics that don't come up in the podcast, brand new topics. So this is additional content. This is not the same content that we're already talking about. This is additional content above and beyond what we're talking about in the podcast. They're short blog posts, so you can read it in the morning over coffee. You can read it while you're giving the kids a bath. These are short little tidbits, little nuggets of information that I want you to enjoy and just be another piece of this incredible community that we are building together in order to raise the future generation. They're just little pieces for you to live your best life and be the best version of you. So head on over to the blog at mominprocess.com/blog. With that being said, let's get back to the show. Okay, so one of the other questions that Cassie had that I'm also really interested in is toddler-based learning and how we can incorporate that while we're also educating, I'll say our older children, but I don't have a 12-year-old, we have an 8-year-old, but that is one thing that I have really struggled with is Lily's incredibly big toddler personality while I'm trying to educate and work with my 8-year-old and 6-year-old, or 7 and 5 at the time when we had kind of started this. And I have tried doing some super basic activities, but she is so much more interested in doing like what we're doing. So What is your theory and how does that work with what you guys have put together for this toddler-based learning and incorporating that?
You want me to dive into that one?
Yeah, I feel like our general rule is that toddlers need to play. That's how they learn. And they don't need to be in school. But I feel like what you're describing is the younger sibling, which I feel like is a whole other animal, because now they want to be involved. And it's very challenging to say to them, like, no, you're separate. And so really what you're looking at is family homeschooling and not just dealing with an individual toddler.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm in the same boat as you. I have a 3-year-old who is adamant that, like I said, she's in first grade too. She's doing all of the same things that her sister does. And it's funny because as you know, I have access to all the levels. So sometimes if I know we have a modified version of whatever we're doing in level 2 with my older daughter, I'll print what we're doing in level 1 so that Juliet can do that. But she doesn't want that. She wants to do exactly what she sees Vivian doing. And my approach to it is to just let her. And I know she's not going to get as much out of it, but she is establishing really good patterns. So let me do the look.
Yeah.
Really good patterns of having a school rhythm to our day, of having lesson time around the same time every day. So when she is ready, she knows what school time is. She knows what it means, and she is just raring to go. I also find that in our program, the way we've designed most of the activities, there's nothing for her to do. Even if we're doing an experiment or something that maybe is a little bit more delicate, there's always a job. And in projects, especially in our level 3 program, we've actually found that some of them are better suited to doing homeschool in a group of some kind. And so you might have your youngest child doing dots of glue, and then the other person is adding whatever they're building, or giving them some sort of meaningful job is often all it takes for them to, if they're not helping, they're at least not being a hindrance to the lesson. Mm-hmm. And then when there is something that I know requires Vivian's full on attention and my full attention, those are the times that I make use of screen time as a tool. That's when Juliet gets to watch a show that she really likes so that Vivian and I can focus. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes, I mean, she's actually pretty good at independent play because, you know, she's a second child, so she had to be. And so that's sometimes when she just gets to have free reign of the Barbies in the playroom, and Vivian and I are doing something at the table that requires more focus. Mm-hmm. So really learning to figure out what each kid can handle, what they want to be involved in, what are those activities that do require that more intentional focus, and what are the ones that we can do as a group. And if it gets a little messy, it's not that big a deal. Mm-hmm. And see, most of my pictures that I take of our homeschool day are of both of them. And sometimes I just print out the same sheet for Juliet, and she sits there and just scribbles all over the map or whatever it is, and Vivian does what she's actually supposed to do. But they're both equally proud of what they've created after the lesson. So I think just kind of, again, letting go of the structure that we maybe have in our head and just embracing the family homeschooling. It's not so important if everybody's getting the same thing out of it, but you are creating a pattern and a rhythm that you will use for years to come.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like if you eliminate the grade level where things are taught, what you'll eventually have is two kids that are learning progressively together. And my two oldest are 2.5 years apart. They were 3 grade levels apart, according to the school system. But we learned history and science pretty much together all the way along. And one of the things I was taught early on by fellow homeschoolers was to teach to your oldest. Make sure your oldest is continuously being challenged, and the younger one will just keep getting what he can out of it, and it will continue to just keep raising the bar. Mm-hmm. And secondly, like as they do get older, like maybe not when they're toddlers, but when you have two kids, they're separate ages, they will learn like this is now mom time and this is independent learning time, and then you switch off. Mm-hmm. And if that just becomes part of your routine, then they will learn to learn like that. Mm-hmm.
And there are some, like there is a learning curve with that, because in the beginning, a 3-year-old doesn't care if you want to have like focused learning time with your older child, but you just kind of steadily reinforce it. And also like not that much time, like maybe start with just 5-10 minutes and build from there as each child gets older. Because like Cynthia was saying, there are skills that you learn that are developmentally based. And then there are ones that like history or science that are just sort of stories and reactions and curiosity. And those are things that are universal. They don't require a specific grade to get something out of it. Even if it's just learning that this is fun. It's fun to sit and do school at the table with my big sister. And I can't wait to do more of this.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say? I love all of that, by the way. So what would you say for the people? Because like, here's something that I went through. I'll just kind of use myself as an example because it's easiest, but we're probably going to be transitioning out of our existing curriculum. And I'm all about shedding things and not getting too caught up in our identities, but not everybody is fully aware of that. And I think sometimes people latch onto a curriculum or a homeschool philosophy maybe and say like, this is what we're going to do for the next 10 years without, pivoting from that or adjusting based on like what their family's needs are. So I'm taking a look at what we're doing and realizing, there's some issues here and we're really struggling, and we've given it some time and we've stayed consistent, and we're still having issues. And I don't need to go into all the details of it, but it's just something's not working. And so we're transitioning out of that. But what advice would you have for the people that are like, no, but we love this curriculum. We love this curriculum, but there's just something that's not working. Maybe I need to try harder at this. Maybe I need to do something. So somebody that's hesitant to switch out of their existing curriculum, maybe move into something more play-based, just like what you guys are offering, but is hesitant because they've kind of latched onto this other philosophy or this other company, curriculum?
I think it's important to do a lot of reflection. That's something that we encourage families to do.
Mhm.
And I think that when a family is just holding on to something that isn't working, it's because they're afraid. They're afraid to try something different. It's their own insecurities that are creeping in.
It's overwhelming to find something new. There's so many options. It can feel like, oh, I'm not going to dive back into that ocean. Like it's
Right.
too much.
Right.
And I feel like choosing a curriculum is not a lifelong commitment. And especially if you have more than one child and you're trying to meet everybody's needs, it's almost impossible to find that one thing from the very beginning that's going to work for everyone long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've really found for us, it's kind of trial and error. But Justine, like you said, it does get very overwhelming where you're like, but I already did all the research and this is what I landed on. And I was so sure that this was going to work for us. Shit. Now what do I do?
Yeah.
I don't want to have to start all over, but once you realize, like you said, just do it, like Cynthia, like you said, just doing that self-reflective work and like, okay, this isn't interesting them anymore. Everybody's bored. How many times have the kids cried this week? And it's not supposed to be like that. We don't want it to be like that for the parent as well as the student. So thank you for diving into that and answering that question, because I think there's a lot of people that tend to hesitate to transition into something new or to try something new. Like you said, based out of fear. I mean, just homeschooling in general for us, we were hesitant to try based out of fear. What are people going to say about my kids? What are people going to say about me? Are they going to be smart enough? Are they going to be good enough? All of those fears that come with it. Are they going to be the weird kids? And now, like you were saying, Justine, they are completely the opposite of lacking in socialization. They are so social, it's sometimes like a problem. Okay, stop talking. Stop. Come on over here. That's a stranger, which I love. But so where do you guys find your inspiration to come up with these units and this program?
So much of the initial list of 36 themes that went into our first level was just based on what we know kids are interested in. We know kids love airplanes. They love bugs. They're interested in their pets. Most kids like dinosaurs. So we took those topics that I felt like, and Justine felt like, were synonymous with childhood. I have all boys. She has all girls. So we thought about, like, what do our kids like? And then also, I thought back to some of the experiences we had when we lived in New York City and we were visiting museums and taking classes. And we used those as inspiration for our themes. So we have a unit called Light, Shadows, and Rainbows. And I thought back to a museum that we spent a lot of time on called the Hall of Science and some of the fun things that we learned there. We went to an old historical home once that did a program on quilts. And what do they call? Yeah. That book is based on.
Yeah. So I think quilts is one of those ones that you hear it and you're like, oh, quilts, can't wait. But really there's so much historical significance to quilts as far as
Underground Railroad.
Oh,
that was the word.
Or in the Underground Railroad, quilts were used as maps to freedom.
Yeah.
And there were also, quilts were one of the main things that families brought with them when they immigrated to other countries. Right. And so when you look at the history of quilts, what you end up learning a lot about is history, a lot of American history, and a lot of family history. So that whole unit turned into this really beautiful exploration of how all of these families ended up where they were and created the lives they wanted. And they used their quilts as this record of their lives. So that was just one theme that's where that came from.
So like sometimes they sound very abstract, but there's usually a book or a museum that inspired them. And then, like I mentioned, we in New York City, I ran a club called Passport to the World. And that's when I realized that if you just take one country, you can pretty much learn anything. Any country, you can learn anything, and it touches on every subject. And that's what level 3 does. So right now, we're about to publish Japan for our level 3. And it's so amazing. It's so fascinating. Not only are you're learning geography and history, but innovations. They're going to learn about the Japanese toilet. They're going to learn about Honda. They're going to read biographies. They're going to read about the plants, the animals, the volcanoes. There's just so much you can learn. And what we encourage families to do is when they get these unit studies is not do every single thing. Follow your kid's lead. If you have a kid that just loves science, look for the science units. And instead of just breezing over those topics, just dig deep into them so that it could naturally become whatever that child wants to explore.
And using that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Justine, you're fine.
I was to say, and then now that we are expanding our company and we are having more levels and more units available, we've also turned to our community. We've asked them, what do your kids want to learn more about now that they have really been encouraged to take an active role in their education? Let's follow your child's lead. If there's a country that they are really interested in, like my daughter has been asking us to do Australia for like a year and a half. And so Australia is in level 2+, and it's in the next round of level 3 countries. And we're very communicative with our social media audience, and we asked all of them, what would you love to see? And that inspired a lot of our new units that are coming out. So we really want to make sure that we're following our own children's interests and the interests of the people who are actually subscribing to our program. And fortunately, those topics tend to be pretty universal. Most kids are pretty excited to learn about Australia or lizards or space. So that enables us to take those, and then the way our units work is that we extrapolate on that theme. So you are learning about the actual thing, but then we're taking that and using a part of it as the basis for the math lesson, or what's going to inspire them to write a comic about something imaginary that has to do with that theme. One of my favorite examples is actually what we're doing right now with our animal care unit, which is our current public or featured unit for levels 1 and 2. Within that, we have a math, you learn about horses one day, and then we have a math lesson where horses are measured in hands, which is like a 4-inch unit. And so we had them learn about standardized measurements and non-standardized measurements and do a comparison. If they were to measure something with their hand and then their parent's hand, how far off would those be? And like, what are the pros and cons? So bringing something as simple as animal care and taking it into a fairly advanced math lesson for a kid who's from 5 to 7, but they get this really concrete understanding of something that sounds very abstract, and they'll remember that hands-on approach.
And then apply it. They can actually take that and apply it to like real world. I mean, you could take it a step further and you could go tour somebody's farm and see the horses in person.
Yes.
And one of the things that I was thinking about that I love that you give your members the space and the grace and the freedom to do is, if this interests your child, then dive into it. If this doesn't, then maybe move past it. And I was thinking, you were talking about Japan, Cynthia, about the toilets, and then you're also talking about the plants and the flowers. And I was like, okay, Olivia would love to know about the mechanics and toilets and just, those types of things. Gracie probably would be like, oh, that's really cool. Move on. Oh, there's plants and flowers. Let's dive into that one, So it just gives opportunity for the things that they are interested in. Olivia has a much more engineer mindset. She wants to know why things work the way they work. And she wants to tear it apart and understand it and see, why does the toilet water come up, and Olivia or Gracie wouldn't be as interested in that. She would want to see the beautiful flowers and, what their nature life looks like, and then put together what that place would feel like and smell like outside. And so it's just, I love that you guys have opportunities within all of that for all of the different types of personalities and interests. So how does your membership work? Can you guys explain that? Like
right
how
now,
you sign up for it, where you sign up for it, and that kind of stuff.
yes. So for last year and this year, we have membership through our website, learnandliveletter.com. And up until the end of this year, we've had subscribers subscribe to a specific level. So 1, 2, or 3. And they have access to any published or previously published units in that level from the moment they subscribe. And then throughout the year, we release new units incrementally. For level 3, it's once a month. And for level 1 and 2, it's 4 a month, because those are only week long. So they can also subscribe. We had school year subscriptions that we would progressively prorate throughout the year to reflect the access that was remaining. And then we also had, we used to have 3-month subscriptions, and then we had 1-month subscriptions, because some people just want to try it out, see if it works for their family. And then going into the new school year, we're actually restructuring our membership model. So now there will be one universal membership. If you subscribe, then you have access to all of the levels, which became really important to us because we had so many users that either had more than one child that needed to subscribe to multiple levels. And we would give them a sibling discount, but it's still, one more thing. Or they had a child that was maybe somewhere on one of the edges of our age ranges that we target them at, that they would get halfway through the year and, oh, level 1's not really challenging my daughter anymore. I think we're ready for level 2. And we would help them to change their subscription. But how great would it be if they just, based on the day, based on the activity, based on the unit, could just pick the level that made the most sense for where their kid was at. We talk a lot about meeting your child where they are, the moment that they are there. And so with this universal membership, they'll be able to do that. We're again breaking it down. There will be a year-long membership, which now is a calendar year, because people like yourself are schooling year-round, or they're taking months off, and they might not necessarily be the months that we're taking off, so they shouldn't be confined to what we want to do. And then there'll also be a 3-month block that will be rolling. So if it'll just resubscribe them at the end of the 3 months, or they could cancel. And again, we'll also have the month. So all of those will be auto renewing in the new year, but if they at any point want to cancel, they can cancel. So we think that'll be really great to help people embrace the freedom of homeschooling and really let their child lead the direction of how they're educating them.
I love that you guys have the support for the parents. Oh, sorry. Nope, go ahead, Cynthia. You're fine.
I was thinking that sometimes in our communities, we have like field trips planned. And wouldn't it be great if like you found the unit that matched that trip or
vacation?
Yeah, or that vacation. So sometimes it's middle of winter, but you're going to South America for a trip. So now you can take that beach unit and you can look for books and maybe a few activities to do on the airplane. And now you're getting ready for your life, for your experiences. And I just feel like we're trying to support families as much as possible. And this is how we hope to do it.
Yeah, we actually have a subscriber that she had signed up for the year early on, and she had a beach vacation planned. And she saw on our schedule that we had an ocean unit that was going to be, it's actually our second to last unit of the year. And she emailed us and she said, is there any way I could get it early so that I can teach my kids about the ocean and the beach before we go? And then when they go, it'll all come together for them. We're like, yeah, of course, that's a great idea. And so we did end up publishing it just for her so that she could teach her kids. But I think that was one of the beginnings of the inspiration for us of like, wouldn't it be great if we could do this for everybody? Everybody could just have it when they need it. And so now they'll have that freedom.
I love that. I love that so much. So one of the things that you guys offer also is some support for parents and some, and how does that work? Do you consider it mentoring? Do you do calls kind of as needed, or what does that look like?
I feel like all the way through, we were supporting our members who reached out to us.
Mm-hmm.
And if they felt comfortable asking a question, then we would absolutely be helping them.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like the way I got supported when I first started was because I was in New York City and there were hundreds of homeschoolers and we were all together. We would go to trips and I would go to classes and I would get this support where the mom sitting next to me and I would talk. I would ask her a question. She would talk about her struggles. I would talk about mine. It was this amazing environment that I only realized later not everybody has.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're doing this, when we started our company, we're just producing these unit studies. But later we started talking about how we could support people further. And I know that those conversations I had were invaluable. And what if we could do that for our community? And so now, as part of our new membership coming in July, starting in July, anyone who subscribes for the year will get 3 mentoring sessions. It'll be Zoom calls with any family who wants to participate that's in that membership tier. And we'll talk about specific things that we have in mind based on the time of year. So in the beginning, it'll be about getting started. In the middle, it'll be that homeschool slump that many of us go through after a few months in.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the year, we're going to talk about different things that are concerning us. If we're in a state that does testing or assessment, that might be one of our topics.
Mm-hmm.
But it really is going to be an opportunity for members to talk about their struggles, their joys. And I just wanted it to be that conversation space where anyone can talk about things and share things. Because what we all find is that it doesn't take long to get that confidence, and that confidence is contagious. So if we're in a room with people that have been homeschooling for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you're going to see they're going to be part of the conversation, and it's going to be encouraging to everyone who's in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always felt so fortunate that Cynthia was my first real window into homeschooling, because I always had her encouragement. From the very beginning, even before we were actually schooling, she was always telling me that I could do it. Even when I was like, are you sure? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But she always believed in me. And any potential roadblocks that I would come up against, she was always like, oh, we had something similar. Her oldest boys and like my 2 girls had sometimes similar personalities in the way they approach learning. And so she's like, oh, it just reminds me so much of Caleb. And she would kind of not only offer advice and suggestions, but just kind of give me that peace of mind that like, this is a thing. This is a thing that all homeschool parents encounter. And something we're really hoping with these Zoom sessions is that they will be very interactive and people won't get stuck in their homeschool silo of, I am failing because this is happening. It will just be, this is something that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not you, it's not your kid. It's just a thing. So now let's help you get over that thing or get around that thing or find some way to make it work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Or laugh at that.
Or laugh at the thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Or cry.
Right.
Like either way.
Because as much as we love it, it is hard. And like, there's just no getting around that. And anybody who tries to tell you that you need to love it every second or be happy all the time or always want to be with your kids or always want to be home with your kids, I just don't buy into that. That's not my personal experience. I think that's not, I want to say that's not natural, but I know there are people that really do love it and that's great for them. But for me, just being home, just with my kids, only talking to each other, never leaving our table it's not the way I want them to think about learning or the childhood that I really want them to have. So giving people the freedom to break out of whatever preconceived notion they have, whatever pressure they're feeling from family members or school districts or just their own brains. That's what we really want to give them is the gift of the homeschool freedom and all that it really lets you do. It doesn't confine you to much. So you can always shift course and we want them to feel empowered. That was something that we baked into our brand from the very beginning was we love homeschooling. We want to help you find a way to love it too. whatever that looks like for you. So now that we are able to do that, Cynthia's been wanting to do, she literally has asked me, could we possibly do 30-minute phone calls with every single subscriber? And I've looked at her and been like, and how much time do you have in a day? Because that's insanity. Like she's had so many iterations of this idea that she's always really excited about, because she loves talking to people about homeschooling and helping them.
Yes. But this last time.
I was like, okay, that could work. Yes.
I got the idea. You're going to like my story.
And we really love talking to people. Like we are, anyone who has communicated with us on Instagram knows we are very responsive. Like we want to hold your hand. We want to spend a 30-minute phone call with all of you every month if we could, but we can't. So we try to make sure anything that we put out in our newsletters, in the lessons themselves, in our social media posts, in our silly little reels, you walk away feeling better and feeling stronger and more empowered to do what you know in your gut works, not only for your kid, but for you too. You are a part of this process, and we don't want to leave the parent out and just focus on the child, because that happens a lot. And so that was something we wanted them to know. We see you too. We see your struggle, and we've been there. We might be there right now, and you're not alone in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you can support the parents and make sure the parents are good. And this is actually that's like the premise of my entire podcast. If I can make sure that the moms that are home with their children are good, then it's all going to be okay. But we have to make sure that the moms are okay. And so like what you guys are talking about, we have to make sure that whoever is in charge of educating them, whether it's mom or dad or, whoever adult is taking care of that, making sure that they're good and that they have confidence. And if they are in a slump, or if they have questions, or if they are struggling, they have a space to ask questions or whatever. So then that way they're good, and they can come out of that and they can continue to do what it is they need to do, because you're so right. A lot of the times everything is so focused on the children. Well, that's great. And we love that, but mom has to be okay too.
Right. We know you're going to focus on your kid. We don't need to tell you to do that. No one is more invested in our children than we are. Yes. But like you said, you need to be good too. If you're not good as the educator, if you hate homeschooling, it's really hard for your kid to love learning.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. Yes. Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming on today and diving into this conversation and sharing your beautiful, incredible curriculum. I'm so excited to learn more about it myself. And Cassie, I know, is really excited to sign up for this and start it within her household. So where can everybody find you in case they're interested in learning more or just want to go ahead and sign up?
So our website is learnandliveletter.com. Our subscriptions for the new school year 22-23 will open up July 6th. So stay tuned for that. If you want to try us for a month, we have those subscription options available now. It's still broken down by level, but you can find all of that on our website. We'd also love if you follow us on Instagram at Learn and Live Letter. That's where we share a lot of tips, encouragement, that even if you're not subscribed to us, we still think is really helpful. We cover just a lot of general homeschooling challenges. We poke fun at a lot of things, really just try to bring some of the joy back to it while also sharing what we think is really valuable information. So we love our community there, and we'd love for anyone to join that as well.
That's awesome. And I'll make sure to put all of that in the show notes so nobody has to pause and rewind and go back to it. We'll make sure to list all of that in the show notes. Thank you guys so much. Do you have anything else that you want to add before we sign off?
You can set up everything.
I mean, we could talk forever. You should never give us that option.
Yes, no, that's totally fine. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, ladies. I really appreciate you. And I think what you're doing in the world is absolutely incredible. And I'm so excited to have this kind of bird's eye view, but this also one-on-one conversation with you to just see how this expands and grows, and just the joy that you're bringing to so many families and as well as their children. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you. We had fun.
We had a great time with you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining Justine and Cynthia and myself in this incredible conversation. I want to give a huge shout out to them and just make sure that they understand how much I really appreciated them coming on, sharing their knowledge, sharing their experience with myself and this audience, because I feel like these conversations just help all of us really accept where we are, understand that every single household is different. Every single household is unique. Every single child is unique in their learning experience and the journey for them to develop and grow and be educated. And I really appreciate that the work that they're doing for not only our children, but also for the parents as well, and supporting parents and encouraging and giving space for these types of conversations. So if you'd like to find out more about this incredible unit study and Live and Learn Letter, as well as Justine and Cynthia, please head on over to their Instagram page, or you can head on over to the website. I will put all of their contact information and website information in the show notes below. I really encourage you to follow them on Instagram for encouraging reels and encouraging and also educational topics and posts that they put out on a regular basis as well. So thank you so much for listening today, sweet mamas. I look forward to talking to you all again very soon.